Chapter 2.
I'm Eric Cargill.
And I'm Rachel Elnar, and this is Cheers and Tears.
Design Leadership Tales Retold.
Today's guest is a designer, executive, and advocate for design's power to create real change. She's held top leadership roles at AIGA, where she's championed community, inclusion, and design's impact on business, government, and society. At the Obama White House, Ashleigh led creative and digital strategy, making government more accessible and effective. She later co-founded a consultancy modernizing public services and launched DotGov Design, a nonprofit connecting government designers. Today, she advises, speaks, and drives initiatives at the crossroads of design, leadership, and social good, pushing for inclusive innovation and values-driven organizations. Say hello to Ashleigh Axios. Hi, Ashleigh.
Hi, Ashleigh.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on.
So, Ashleigh, can you tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of what your leadership role was within AIGA, which chapters, how long you served, and how you got involved?
Yeah, so that could be a long story. I'll give you the short version to start with, and then we could dig into things, wherever you want to dig in. But I started first by volunteering with AIGA DC when I first moved to the DC area after college. And that was like 2009, 2010. I volunteered and set up chairs at events, things that you're familiar with on the local chapter level. I think I did the branding for, I want to say it was the 2010 DC Design Week, and really got pulled into the community from a fellow RISD graduate who was involved and on the board at the time. It was really great about helping people find community locally. But I spent time on the AIGA board after that, the board of Washington, DC chapter. And through that, ran parallel initiatives and got involved in, awards and these other kind of subcomponents, and then found myself on the national board of directors afterwards. So all in all, my AIGA leadership roles span programming coordinator, sponsorship chair, president of the local chapter, conference chair for, the national AIGA conference, board director for the national organization, and then president eventually of the national organization. All of that was like an 11-year, probably more like 13 years if you're counting those chair setup years of kind of back to back just being involved at different levels.
Oh, wow. You've definitely done it all.
I think it's like at the heart of being, part of community, though, is you go where their opportunities and their needs are. And we could talk more about this later if you're interested, but I feel like the more you give and put into community, the more you get out of it, not in a transactional way, but in a way that I think people feel like, oh, I paid for a membership and now I'm a member. And what did I get for it? You're like, oh, you've got to show up to events, talk to people. It's about putting in the effort and making something of the connections and those opportunities. And sometimes that can kind of obviously snowball in cases like mine.
When was your first leadership retreat?
My first one, I'm pretty sure was 2012, Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City was gorgeous, and I remember just being so impressed with how well organized things were and how many people there were from so many different chapters. It was a really fun experience and overwhelming at times, but in the best kind of way.
Did you have goals coming into the leadership retreat that were different than when you got there?
I think so. I think initially it was you know, ones that you feel so obvious once you've been to ones that you're like, you don't need to have that as a goal.
Right.
Oh, meet people from different chapters. you like, you know, like learn about how different chapters do programming and, some of the differences in how they engage community. It's like, oh, that's just so built into everything that a leadership retreat is for AIGA that you're like, okay, check, you're going to the leadership retreat. That's just going to happen. And I don't know how much I did this in the first year, but I think over many years of going, like kind of finessing that of trying to learn people had certain skill sets that we might be able to, you know, collaborate with on an event, or somebody that did something really successful that we could try modeling directly, maybe see if there's some resource sharing that can happen. So it got a little bit more specific, I think, over time.
When I first went to mine, I was VP of communications. And I know that we had a couple events coming up and mentorships that I wanted to explore from other chapters, how they did it. So, how did they structure it? How did they get the word out? So, I had these goals coming into it and had no clue how much I would get from just being there. Like you said, all you had to do is be surrounded by the community and you were bombarded with creative ideas. Every night we would be debriefing all the things that everyone learned. It was overwhelming in a good way.
I forgot about the debrief. So you mentioned that I had like a rush of all these like debrief conversations that like came back to me that I had completely forgotten about, but you're spot on with those.
What made you want to get more involved? Like you said, you could just sign up, you're a member, great, what do I get out of it? But what made you take that next step?
I think it was part like kind of trusting some members of community that I've met who had some things figured out, right? So like Anthony Dow's a person who I mentioned who like told me to get involved, and he knew so many people and he was, recommending people to connect with. So it was like, oh, like I'm meeting these people too and making my own connections. I didn't really have a network or community in DC when I moved to, and to go from like art school where you have so much in common with people to being in a city that the creative scene is not super apparent on the surface. It takes some time to get into that sense of community and figure out where it was. There was like a gap there I needed some help navigating, and so I had supports and kind of mentors in that way who helped be like, no, like keep at it, keep going,
Mhm.
and was kind of following their lead, but also seeing some of the initial signs that there was something to it, right? If I didn't start making connections, so easily at these events initially, maybe I would have been a little bit more skeptical and like tried a different tactic, but it was kind of paying off in community really quickly.
I found it always tended to do that. I got involved and went to, volunteered at a few things, and people were really wanting to draw you in, very quickly it seemed. Actually, I don't know if you remember this, but I met you in Denver. It was on the bus, and we were headed to whatever crazy after party thing we had going on, and you just struck up a conversation I thought was great, because you were just so nonchalant about, oh yeah, I work at the White House. And I was just, I had no words after that. I was like, I think I asked you what that was like. And then later I was kicking myself going, really? That was your line of questioning? Um, but
It's a fair question.
yeah, yeah, no, it's a fair question. But yeah, I was just struck by how accessible everybody is at these things, no matter where they are in their
Yeah.
careers. There were a lot of after party activities. Were there any memorable ones that stood out to you, or anything else that stands out in your mind as notable?
So many, but there's some of the most fun times, I think. I loved, Denver prom, and like there were paper corsages that were made and stuff. But one of my favorite leadership retreat memories is actually going with my local AIGA DC folks who are all in attendance that year to the amphitheater outside Denver, the like Red Rocks amphitheater. And I think it's even gotten more and more kind of precious and amazing over time because one of the team members has since passed away, but we had this
Mm.
wonderful walk as a team and bonded and got to know each other and experienced a new area that I had never been to before. I know it was the first time for some of the other members of my chapter, and it felt like we're experiencing something together for many of us for the first time, building bonds with one another that we're really going to take back with us to DC and like spreading positive energy around. It was just a gorgeous, meaningful moment. But most of mine were less like walks and more like dance parties, after party. That was like during the day. um, and two of my favorite ones, the like kind of like late night after party style, were I think it was Raleigh in a LGBTQ plus nightclub that was just really fun. And I feel like especially like members of the community were able to like let go and be themselves more fully and freely in that space. And it just felt like such a celebration of AIGA and like crossover of culture in a way that was really powerful and memorable. Um, and another one was a dive bar in Dallas, where like there's a pool table. I don't think it was, I don't know if like Francis was the one to suggest this place or how a bunch of us got there. But you could tell it was usually like pretty low key and mellow. And we just kept turning it up and until it became this massive dance party, people dancing on like pool tables with the owner's consent. And it was just, like kind of a raucous time that had us as like national board members and chapter leaders and staff members, like all just kind of mingling and, you know, just celebrating life and enjoying each other's company with like side conversations and just I want to say it's like a wild time, but in like the most kind of like weirdly PG way at the same time.
Sure.
It was really fun.
It was definitely magical. There was something where I feel that we could all let down our hair and really be with each other, whether it's being part of that sunrise club or trusting each other on these, 5-level pyramids or whatnot. That was most definitely the leadership experience for me. That looking around, see who else had a name tag and becoming instant friends, whether you knew them or not.
It's so true. I've had some really vulnerable conversations too. I know in Philly, like instead of dancing at one of the after parties, me and a member of like the AIGA Connecticut team had a deep conversation about like family history in the corner. Like crying. I will forever feel super bonded with him having just like talked about some of those experiences. So it's like vulnerable and creative and fun and all these things at the same time.
And I always wonder why that is. Like, I've been part of other communities. I've gone to other conferences. Like, why? You might not have the answer to this, but I'm going to ask anyhow. Why do you feel like AIGA were able to really build in that trust and that vulnerability with each other?
Well, I think it's such a segment when you're talking about the like volunteer chapter leaders too. You've got groups of people who are not just AIGA members, which are already fantastic and wonderful, but like people who are volunteering significant portions of their time to building community and to take the extra time out to join each other on these like retreats, time away from work that you could have spent with family or a friend trip or these other things. You've already got so much in common in this dedication to community and community building that I think a lot more just kind of clicks into place from there, knowing that you're like, you care about the profession, you are totally bought in on the mission, like to advance design as a professional craft and strategic advantage and vital cultural force, but you're doing it in a local level and local flavor and, having so much in common, I think as a basis makes it even more intriguing, the differences between how things show up on a local level or makes you even more curious. I found on yeah, Rachel, what's your experience? How did you get into this? Because everybody's journey is so different, and yet we've all kind of come into a similar place somehow.
It's so different. And that's what the whole series of conversations have been about is how did you get in? Why did you get in? But the one thread I think that has bridged us all is that we're all highly empathetic. We're all highly creative. We really care about building community. And that might just be it. That might be the simple answer is that we just all love what we do. And we so much so that we spend our waking hours unpaid to do what we love, which is
Yeah.
this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's no ego. I didn't find any ego involved. I mean, everybody was there to get something out of it, or equally put something into it that they all wanted to be a part of.
What were your first retreats?
Mine was Denver. I got a late start in the design community, as it were. I was in my early 40s by the time I got involved with AIGA and everything, and I wish I had gotten involved a lot earlier. I was nervous because I was older, and I wasn't sure how people were going to embrace me being there, and it was such a non-issue. And just like you said, I started by volunteering. I volunteered one time, and then somebody approached me about being on the board, and then
That's fast commitment escalation. They were on it.
Well, and it was for something that absolutely terrified me at the time, which was cold calling people and asking for money was not in my wheelhouse. But I took that on because I was, number one, I didn't want to let anybody down. Number two, I believed in the mission, and number three, it was a stretch goal. It was like, okay, I'm learning here. But yeah, I was on the fast track. It was Denver, then Grand Rapids after that.
Grand Rapids was so much fun. My first retreat was Omaha, 2008. It was definitely life-changing. So I feel like that is the one benefit of being on the board that just changes your life. I mean, after that, up until that point, you drink the Kool-Aid, you're doing your best. And then after that, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm never going back to being a civilian after that. I'm a lifer.
Yeah, you're like, who would want to miss this? Yeah.
Exactly.
Keeps you involved. I only wish some more chapters had more people to send. I know that it was hard if you're a really small chapter, there were limited seats. So I felt super privileged to be a part of a large chapter where we got to generally send, I think 5, sometimes 6 people. That was huge. And I imagine it feels different too if you're going and meeting people for the first time and you're one from your chapter.
And you got much deeper into it. So you didn't just stay in your chapter level, you went much further. So can you tell me a little bit about the .gov design conferences that you were involved with?
This kind of is in parallel to being on the local DC chapter. But when I was working in government and serving on my board locally, I'll actually back up a step and say, because you mentioned Eric too, just having questions, being like, oh my gosh, creative director at the White House. I had my own experience like that when I was board member for AIGA DC, and I met the creative director at the time, Kodiak Starr, for the White House. And so I thank AIGA for even helping me get the connections that led to me working at the White House. Was just like a happy hour event, but that's how I even knew that was an opportunity.
Yeah.
But in general, I kept, volunteering even while working at the White House, which was a lot to juggle. But I noticed how segmented designers were across government, and so many in the DC area, but also state and local government. You could have in DC a designer in Department of Energy who's doing something really similar to a designer in Department of Labor, and they have no idea, and they barely have any support in their agencies for it. So it was some of this could be solved, low-hanging fruit. We can create within AIGA-DC this initiative to connect and empower government designers because they're being paid by taxpayer dollars. So it's a good idea anyways to keep them from doing the same work as each other. If there's knowledge sharing, resource sharing, that's going to benefit everyone. So we started with just, monthly events, and they were just part of the AIGA DC programming, but branded. And we asked the community over time, do you want this to be separate or not? And they were like, I think that credibility with AIGA is important. So those who are participating really helped us decide to make it a full-blown initiative within AIGA DC. And then over time, it was successful enough that I was like, I think we're ready for a conference. And to be honest, everybody else is like, Ashleigh, stop it. No. It's too much. Um, but one of my problems is I do a lot, and um, and I had gotten asked to speak at like How Design Live in Chicago. So I also was like, I'd love to have a safe group that I could talk about some of this stuff with, and practice my own talk with. So I put together, kind of chaired and organized, and wore way too many hats for the first conference for .gov design. And it was really, you know, scrappy in nature. But the design community and government really loved it. And it was pulling in more people from state and local too. Some people were traveling, many hours to get to this thing. And so that helped us go, okay, there's more here that we can do and invest in having. At the time, the aim was yearly conferences, and they've spaced it out since. So I'm glad to have set up that effort and initiative. And it's one of those things that also taught me a huge lesson about like ownership when you're doing community work. I think it's very tempting, especially in the design space. There's pressure, I feel, to be like, to own the IP, to hold everything, close, because people are always trying to like steal from artists, like legit concerns. But when you're doing stuff in community, it's such a different vibe. And I felt really kind of grateful and excited that I was a big part in building this thing. And now it is like fully operating and running as a part of AIGADC, even though I'm not a part of the chapter anymore. I'm not directly a part of that initiative myself. So it's cool to see things even continue to like grow up without you. And I think that's an experience I'm sure is not, uncommon in AIGA in general.
That's so wonderful. I'm sure you benefited so many people.
For sure.
I mean, the connection helped you, but connected hundreds more than you.
I mean, it's cool. One of the first conference, I don't know if you've all, and this is dorky government design stuff, but the US web design system is like the unifying system across government websites for design and engineering systems and structures. You might be familiar with other ones like material design and stuff too, these design systems that are really impactful. The first prototype and discussions about the US web design system started at the first .gov design conference, and
Oh,
was
wow.
like, what do you think? Can we do this? Can we put it together? And was one of those like unconference sessions that somebody led during that time. So it just gave people like a forum to hash out these ideas in person too. So I feel, well, yeah, excited to have been a part of building that up. That's one of the like many stacks in parallel where it gets really messy, because I was like, is it going to be part of AIGA-DC or is it not going to be? And it ended up feeling really nice to kind of package that together, and is part of my time on that local chapter, but it continues today.
I can't tell you how many times I've referenced that US web design system at my previous job, which was in logistics. And as a designer, a lot of times you need to negotiate and convince people of certain things. And as thorough as that website was, it was easy to take something and say, this is what I'm talking about here, and if it's good enough for the US government, it should be good enough for us, right?
That's awesome.
In your time of leadership through AIJ, is there anything that influenced your career or anything that you've learned from it that you're using now?
Yeah, I mean, a ton. The first experience that I got managing others and like directly supervising others was through AIGA. So even it helped me in my career trajectory, because I had a boss that was like, well, you haven't managed others, so I don't know if this would make sense. It's like, actually, manage a team of 23 people outside of here. And they're like, wait, what? That's huge. And of course, I've built on that substantially over time, but it, like, that initial experience has been a cornerstone in my career. And I think not every workplace supports people on their management journey, but because the DC chapter, had been operating for a while, there are really good playbooks for your own local leadership retreat and how to orient new team members, and things that I in part could just take for granted as like, this is just how it should be done. You're going to need to orient people when they when they join any
Mhm.
team. You need time for this. It's an investment. You have to make sure everybody's on the same page. That has become, essential to how I lead any project team or um, company team, people that I'm managing to. Um, I also have my, more on the like negative lesson learned side. I had my first experience splitting a role with somebody and learned that that really isn't for me. It's not for my personality type. So it was somebody I respect the hell out of too, to be quite clear. But
Yeah.
um, we were both co-programming directors, and they were very big vision people. And I was like, but we have to get things done too. And I felt like I was just doing so much more like operationalizing things, and the balance wasn't there. So I just learned about myself, what works for me, what doesn't work for me on that front. And I think it saved me some pain later, where I could have shared responsibility on something and just setting more clear lines on, you know, different roles, what they do, how they complement each other, instead of just like dividing it down the middle and hoping it'll work out in the end.
I think we all learn a lot of management duties and lessons while we're in AIJ. Not only is because everybody is a volunteer, and so you're also weighing out what people want to do and get out of the experience versus what you're going to do, and try to balance both of those. But also negotiation. I mean, there's a lot more negotiation than I ever expected to learn
Yeah.
in AIJ. All we knew is that we had a job to do. And thank God with AIJ, we knew what the job was. It wasn't like, okay, let's sit here and brainstorm what are we going to do for revenue. Events was mostly what people were doing. And so how you did it was different from board to board. And a lot of times, because we're designers, we like to reinvent the wheel. So it was more painful than it needs to be. But we found our way, right? Like we all had our own voice in how things were crafted together, how things were managed, how things came together. And I love that. It's almost like we all had a legacy because we had a voice on how that came together for our time on the board.
And I think that's spot on. I think it also just, um, as a probably a subset of the management piece, it teaches you how to kind of leave the ladder down so
Mm.
much more than other places, because you have to do succession planning. You failed if you move out of a role and nobody else can do that work after you, even if check the boxes and you did it well yourself. So like supporting others and kind of growing is a part of I think like the meat of things that becomes instilled in so many AIGA leaders. They're really like practicing it well. And I've noticed people figuring out how to do that when they're starting a new chapter, and they don't have all of the structure in place, and
Mhm.
building onto what's been done before too, if they're taking on a role within a chapter that's been around for 25 plus years already. It's a beautiful thing. I know I could probably talk forever about things that I've learned through AIGA, good and bad. It's a complicated ecosystem, and after like 11 plus years, there's so much. Even just like the dangers of pyramids.
Ah.
Okay,
I
let's hear
love
that.
myself a good human pyramid.
And, in terms of pyramid, where did you sit in
I've
the
been on the
pyramid?
bottom.
Uh-huh.
I've been on the bottom. I've been in the middle. Um, I like. Have you ever been in the middle of a pyramid and people keep trying to build it out, and you're like, that's too many on the base. You're like, we need a whole nother pyramid. I've also been the person trying to like steer from the middle of a pyramid. We're like, no, 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 you can't have 7 people on the bottom. What do you think we're doing here? Like, do the math.
Yeah, that's
What's going
pushing
to
it.
happen at the top? Yeah. But we had one in where when Sue Matthews Hale was the president. It was a national board pyramid, and she took her wonderful like designer heels off, and I think she was going for the top, and it was just like a three-person base pyramid, and she fell on her way up, and I
Oh,
was in it, so I didn't see it, but I heard her when she fell, and it was scary enough that, like, I think she didn't sleep that night just in case she had a concussion, and
oh
she
no.
went to the doctor. She moved her flight because sometimes it's dangerous with the, like, altitude and pressure changes to take a flight, so we're like, you know, "Be very careful. Be very, very careful." That could have gone a lot worse. I think we've been really fortunate with, safety, especially considering that sometimes people are out partying and stuff like that for a while before, attempting a human pyramid, but generally, they're so much fun. It's a good way to, like, get to know people. Usually, you're the like, kinda smack dab in the middle, I found, of one where you're like, "Hi, who are you?" Or you're waiting for somebody to get up on top. You don't necessarily know everybody in the, hotel lobby who started it.
Yeah, there were definitely some questionable moments with pyramids, in terms of should we be doing this? Thankfully nobody was, seriously hurt or whatnot. But I do remember, somebody from the front desk calling or coming by because there was too many
Oh, yeah.
people in the rooms
Getting in
and
trouble in that way, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I've definitely, like, taken couch seats off of, like, a hotel couches and ran them over, like, like gym floor mats, like, I'm just gonna start placing these here.
that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I love it.
I can't tell you how much I've spent on, like, Lyft and stuff like that too, just being like, "Are you ready to go?" Out and about, like, "Hey, I see your badge. Are you ready to go back to the hotel? Can I help you back to the hotel?" It's not an official event, but we help each other. We are here to help each other.
Not an official event, but they were always some sort of events. Everyone just found each other and just gathered up. It was great. And
Yeah.
Denver was the first time I ever took an Uber. So I was like, what is this? I'm getting into someone else's car. Yeah.
That's
Stranger's car,
right.
you're like, "Wow."
Ashleigh, are you doing anything with community now?
With AIGA community always, but not in any formal way right now. Lisa Babb, who was on the national board with me, is still a really, really close friend. And something that she'd say all the time is after a certain amount of service, you get to graduate to just being a member. And it's like, I'm a member. I've made it part of the benefits, it like include my last company that, all of our design team members got a AIGA membership so that they could get those events and all of those benefits in. But in a formal capacity, no, I'm like people like Caesar Manahuya who came after me on the national board know I'm around. I'm a resource if they have questions and stuff like that. And it feels good. I think especially being the president of the National Board of Directors during the pandemic, I very much was like, I deserve some peace and a little time to just be a member.
And I 100% agree. Sometimes service is so taxing that just being a member and just attending is so nice, so wonderful. And I feel really honored that you joined us for this podcast today and just being a part of some of the things that you have put together, and just seeing you in your leadership roles have been an inspiration to me, honestly. So I really
For sure.
appreciate it.
For sure. My jaw is still on the floor of that bus in Denver, not knowing what to say.
You're both so kind. It's my pleasure to join, and I'm just excited to hear all the conversations. And it's wonderful to like reminisce and, certain details that you just don't think about unless they're like prompted come back, and it's kind of like warm and fuzzy. Such a wonderful community.
Yeah, I know. Some of the photos that you have shared, I'm really excited to dig in. But I saw, as I was going through these, Alicia, we spoke to Alicia. She's like, you have to talk to Ashleigh. And then you send me these photos. I'm like, there's Alicia in your photos. It's so cute.
I'm like, I wish I could send like a whole, I'm like, I gave you a lot of photos already, but I'm like, I wish I could send like all of the photos because I find them, I don't know, they're so kind of fun. It's such good memories.
Yeah.
There were all sorts of like mingling things that they would do for periods of time, like collect stickers from every chapter and like a sticker book. And I think they prompted the different chapters to like make stickers or make cards for some of those years too, and that was fun. And I always forgot about those fairs. I'd come back with kind of like extra art from events that different chapters did that were, they put out at, open tables and fair style. So you felt like you got all this good like printed swag and
Oh, yeah.
collector's items that not many people got to experience.
I think the most fun thing was not only the community, but the fact that the whole experience was designed so well. Everything from the name tags and, like you said, the city guides. I mean, everything was just really well done. The type was just off the hook. And I was like, these are my people. So beautiful. Everything is just so beautiful.
I miss the in-person. I wish there's a way too to get like all chapter leaders to be able to go to like an in-person one. Like you could do that with the remote, but you can't do it with the in-person. Yeah. Well, hopefully things go strong and there are more of these in the future and we get to hear about like the next generation of them.
We're hoping so. Just wanted to say cheers to you. So thank you again for being so amazing, such a great leader. Thank you.
Cheers.
Oh, thank you.
Cheers. Thank you, Ashleigh.
Thanks, Ashleigh.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
Cheers and Tears will be back next time with more design leadership tales retold.
Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast with your creative community, design leaders, and friends.
Cheers and Tears Design Leadership Tales Retold is a production of Chapter 2 and hosted by us, Rachel Elnar and Eric Cargill. This episode was produced and edited by Rachel Elnar. Podcast graphics by Eric Cargill. Animation by Verso Design and Megatow Design.
The theme music track is Loose Ends by Silver Ships Plastic Oceans. Follow Cheers and Tears on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube podcasts, or wherever you get your audio and video podcasts. Subscribe to our email list at cheersandtears.com so you don't miss an episode.